It's finally time. The hype train is in full steam. Discussions across the internet about what life path you are going to choose, what style is your V going to be, and what genitals are you going to choose from. After so many delays, it's here. The reviews are in and Cyberpunk is a hit. Except for the bad ones, but let's ignore those. Polish Santa is blessing us with an early holiday present. The greatest game of all time. Cyberpunk 2077 is a major disappointment, and I'm so mad I made this YouTube channel because my friends didn't want to listen to hear me rant anymore about it. There is so much potential in this game, and I keep asking myself, what went wrong? How could it go wrong? This is CD Projekt Red. They were the good ones. They were supposed to be an example of how good a game is supposed to be, not join the mediocrity. But what did go wrong? One fateful day, the CEO of CD Projekt Red, Marcin Nowinski, begins talking to Mike Pondsmith, the creator of the original Cyberpunk 2020 tabletop system, and begin discussing plans for a Cyberpunk-style video game, a revolutionary RPG that would be nothing like the RPGs of the past, and change the formula forever. Yes, that's right. Gaming's new power couple were excited to show off their new conceptualized baby. Marcin and Mike are ready, and they're excited. The world needs to see their beautiful baby. Oh, and they made sure not just to tell us about their baby, but they also had a list of ready promises of why this baby was the bestest of all babies. CD Projekt Red releases a teaser trailer, a first look into the dystopian, futuristic world of Night City. The first major step in the unstoppable hype train that is Cyberpunk 2077 has begun. And gamers began getting their hopes up, yet again. And as of the release of this trailer, 50 people were already working on Cyberpunk 2077. But Nowinski had other plans, and moved these 50 developers to help work on his witchery mistress, abandoning Pondsmith and their baby for 3 years. Nowinski, after his 3-year-long affair with Geralt of Rivia, had finally finished its last DLC for The Witcher 3. And Nowinski was ready to run back to Mike with flowers and chocolates in hand. But there were complications. Cyberpunk's old engine was having issues, no longer up to industry standards, so they dropped it for a new one. Work began immediately on a new engine, and if this was going to be the next generation in gaming, CD Projekt Red would need to make the next generation in gaming engines. This new baby would have new advanced AI, math, collision, and physics engines, as well as new shiny graphics and much more. However, this does take a bit of time though, and from the research that I've found, making an engine can take hundreds of hours and sometimes even years, which means it was crunch time. Yes, that's right, the developers were crunching since day one of pre-production, but these crunches weren't giving them a beach body, it was turning them into this. Ugh. Horrifying. Oh, that's so much better. CD Projekt Red was no stranger to working overtime though, as they had already done so with the Witcher series, and with the backlash from those games, they made a promise that they weren't going to crunch as hard with Cyberpunk and other future games. Oops. Sorry. Even with all the disadvantages to get the engine done within the year, as far as we can tell, it seems to be working as intended. Truly a next-generation worthy game engine. After 5 years of almost no Cyberpunk 2077 info, gamers were ready and anticipating its reveal in E3 2018, CD Projekt Red's new project after the legendary Witcher 3. At the end of E3 2018, the trailer drops, the first trailer since 2013, and it looked amazing. But this trailer only left everybody wanting more, but we wouldn't be seeing anything else for a while, as there was a gameplay trailer, but we wouldn't see that until later, as CD Projekt Red only showed it to a select amount of people at E3. And maybe even this new, shiny cinematic trailer would catch the attention of someone very important to CD Projekt Red. After After some time, gamers did get their next hit of that sweet Cyberpunk fix, and the gameplay trailer was finally released to the public. Almost an hour long of Cyberpunk gameplay. It was almost too good to be true. Fans began loading up the video, and it was really good. The trailer advertised huge crowds that had their own daily schedules to help with immersion, good graphics mixed with a stunning artistic representation of the cyberpunk genre, wall running, cybernetic upgrades, and a complex RPG leveling system. Oh my god, it was glorious, and it was all we could ever hope for. Although there was one small issue. This was not the final product of the game and was subject to change, and many at the time thought this meant that there would be more content added. But looking back at this trailer, the missions shown had quite a bit cut/changed, and recent info coming out has shown us that this gameplay trailer was completely fake. And this demo made the hellish development of Cyberpunk 2077 even worse, as many of the developers weren't able to work on the main game, instead being forced to work on a demo that they'd rather not work on. But at the time, hopes were high from The Witcher 3 and everyone was incredibly excited for the game, and the trailer already captivated everyone. Later that same year, CD Projekt Red stated that the game was playable from start to finish, and now all they needed to do was give it that shiny Polish polish that they were so well known for with the Witcher series and their other games. And even though there was no release date, they kept telling the public that it was going to be ready when it was ready. This excited many because it meant that they felt like they cared about the finished state of the game, and they weren't going to release a half-finished mess. This year was a big one for CD Projekt Red, and it didn't stop giving to them, as their constant stream of fan mail and trailers has finally made Senpai notice them. The ultimate in gaming crossover was about to happen as Keanu Reeves joins the Cyberpunk team, and is given the role of Johnny Silverhand, an anarchist rocker bad boy with a hate boner for taking on the man, or the corporations as they call them in Cyberpunk, and as per usual, Keanu absolutely kills the role, and makes for a lot of the game's best moments. Although his addition pushed the game to a new level and brought an amazing talent on, it brought one small downside. Keanu liked Cyberpunk so much and asked to be put in it more. CD Projekt Red, excited by this, doubled the amount of Silverhand in the game. Now, this sounds okay on a surface level. Who doesn't want more Keanu? He was amazing in everything he's been in, and he makes Cyberpunk great. But since the game had already been playable from start to finish, the addition of Keanu upped the crunch a little bit more. And even though we hadn't heard a release date yet, CD Projekt Red had a date ready in their mind, and the pressure was on, and the development was getting tight. A new trailer drops for Cyberpunk 2077, a very shiny new cinematic experience of a snapshot into the story of Cyberpunk 2077. Okay, so this trailer shows V driving away from a heist, with his friend Jackie bleeding out in their car. After a heartwarming moment between the two of them, Jackie dies. Then V goes to Dexter Deshawn's little motel room and is double-crossed. Then the trailer ends. This is pretty much the entire first act of the game, and when I saw this, I was still thinking this game was an RPG, and I said to myself that I would do everything in my playthrough to save Jackie. But no matter what you do, Jackie will always die, and Deshawn will always betray you. I can understand having choices the player can't influence, but why show the majority of the first act of the game in trailers and previews? That being said, this part of the game is easily one of my favorite sequences despite some problems, but I still don't understand what led to the decision of them spoiling Act 1 in its entirety before the game even came out. As the trailer reaches its end, the audience is already blown away. Then they see a character wake up V that looks and sounds just like Keanu Reeves. Confusion and excitement swept the crowd, and like an angel, he walks onto the stage. Keanu Reeves enters the stage, and with hype at an already all-time high, he delivers a message of an RPG that would change gaming forever. And after all of this, we even got a release date for the game, and we were finally gonna get our hands on the greatest game ever on the 7th of April 16th, 2020. It was finally ready when it was ready. When 2020 came, there were some complications, and the date for release gets pushed back from April 16th to September 17th. This was understandable given the global circumstances, and gamers waited until the new release date. Another delay hits, pushing the release of Cyberpunk 2077 to November 19th, but this had to be the last one. The game was playable from start to finish 2 years ago, and they must be polishing to make the game. A tweet appears, quickly spreading across the internet. A final delay to December 10th, 2020, the final release, just right before holiday season. A few more trailers launched before release showing gameplay and features in Cyberpunk, all getting millions of views in a short amount of time and raising the anticipation to new levels. However, it was too late. Millions of gamers awaited Cyberpunk's hype train at the finish line, not knowing that this train didn't have enough time to develop a proper braking mechanic. The time has come. Cyberpunk was finally available to download. Many had it preloaded so they could jump right into Night City as soon as they could. However, there was a day one patch to shove some of those last minute bugs under the rug before release. This stalled the release of the game, as Steam servers became overwhelmed with the hordes of gamers that were downloading Cyberpunk on day one. While PC players were stalled and not able to play Cyberpunk just yet, console gamers did have their chance, and it wasn't good. On the older generation consoles, Cyberpunk is virtually unplayable. It has missing textures, T-posing models, cars exploding for no reason, and broken quests and so many more. The game was almost completely unplayable on PS4 and Xbox One, but why weren't we warned against these bugs from reviewers who got the game early? Well, the reviewers that got their hands on the game early were only allowed to show footage given to them by CD Projekt Red, and also weren't given any of the console versions for the game at all. So consumers that bought the game on older generation consoles had this impression that they were going to have how do I say this? A working game, because they had no idea it was going to be the buggy mess that they got. At this point, many people had finished installing Cyberpunk on their PCs, and they opened up the game as well. It was better than it was on console, but still not great. Even on PC, this game had a large amount of bugs on launch. And while it was funny at first, it started to quickly break immersion to all those playing it, giving a lasting negative impression of the game. The backlash came soon after, and it was intense, many justifiably angry at being lied to about what they were promised. Many cried out for refunds and answers to why their game was so broken. And eventually the backlash was too much, and Sony decided to take Cyberpunk completely off of the PlayStation Sony store, as well as give refunds to those who bought it if they wanted. Microsoft responded as well, but they only offered refunds, and Cyberpunk is still up on their store. By this time, the game had been out for a while, and people started realizing that there were many problems that weren't just the bugs. There are an insane amount of missing features in this game, so much that most lists online don't even cover half of what was actually cut from the game in the first place. One of the things that stood out to me the most out of this list is the AI is just terrible, especially the cop AI. If you commit a crime, officers will just begin spawn teleporting behind you out of your vision. It's almost like they're trying to be a Dragon Ball Z character, and it just is. It's really lazy and just bad. It's like one of the worst cop systems I've ever seen. On top of that, there's no bounty system for tracking your crimes. You can't pay off corrupt cops like you could even in Skyrim. And there's no car chases because there's no driving AI. The police are just a joke. And if you can just drive or walk a few blocks away and they will just fully forget about you entirely. The disappointment doesn't end there, as there are many more missing features that were cut from the final game. If you go back and watch old Night City Wire episodes, it is a goldmine of cut corners, missing content, and downright lies said directly by CD Projekt Red. For example, style was said to have an influence in how people would interact with you, but is nowhere in the final game. Even the armor system itself is broken. When armor scales with a level, that cool suit you found just gets completely outclassed later by short shorts, a bikini, and a corset that you just found on some random gang member just because it has better stats. Why not just attribute armor to cybernetic upgrades and let you just wear whatever you want regardless of stats? As it is right now, armor just clutters your inventory, and the cool ones you find are just going to get outclassed later anyways, so what's the point? The weapons are the same, but at least most of the weapons are pretty fun to use, but it just feels like they're trying to make the whole loot system feel like a looter shooter, where there's this large loot pool of items that constantly makes you switch between your build. And speaking of gang members, the gangs are very underdeveloped and are just pretty much skins for different enemies. Some gangs have different enemy types, like the animals having more HP and a lot more melee opponents, but all the other gangs don't feel very unique to me. I think the Maelstrom gang hacks me more often than others, but I honestly couldn't tell because I always only get overheated and get my position revealed. I haven't seen any other hacks used to me at all. All the gangs and basic enemies of the game just feel so similar. It's really sad since all their designs are pretty unique. And like I said, there are some differences, but not enough to make them stand out enough from each other. Why not just make the gangs have more of an influence on the game overall? Maybe choosing a side with one of them alienates you from the other gangs, similar to how it worked in Fallout New Vegas with the Legion and the NCR. Instead, we only get one gang we can side with, the Aldecados, and even though their questline is quite interesting, it's the only one that really impacts anything, and I just wish we had more from the other ones, instead of them just being skins for different enemy types. Despite all of this, the biggest advantage that Cyberpunk does have is its story. The world of Night City is breathtaking and presented on a pretty massive scale. The characters and story-driven narrative is incredibly intoxicating and makes you want to learn more about this universe and just get lost in it. Sadly, the story is not perfect and does have its issues. There's a lack of choice when it comes to what you'd expect from the next-gen RPG experience. Oh, sorry guys, I gotta take this. Hey, yeah, what's up? Wait, what do you mean it's an action-adventure game, not an RPG? But it's always been marketed as an RPG. They changed their bio on Twitter to action-adventure game? Well, then why the hell does all the promotional stuff say it's a next-gen and RPG experience? Then there's the constant walking behind NPCs, slowly moving towards a new destination. Sometimes they give exposition, sometimes they're just walking, and it's so boring. They already reinvented this in The Witcher 3, so I don't know, why is it so common in this game, and why? Oh wait, actually this one isn't so bad. There are a lot of solid moments in the story. The build-up to Arasaka Tower heist feels like you're preparing for something out of a Mission Impossible movie. Flashback to Johnny Silverhand's past gives you a solid grasp on his personality and why he's so aggressive all the time. All of the romance options are pretty fulfilling and have great character arcs even if you don't romance them. For example, one of the romance options, Carrie Uridine, has an amazing story arc. Carrie Uridine is Johnny's old bandmate. He's depressed and has lost his spark despite making it big and being the famous rocker boy across multiple generations. After a series of quests, you can help reignite his spark to make music again and fight against corporate greed, the whole reason he started making music in the first place. And by the end of this questline, you feel like you just helped a friend find himself again. And that's only one of the relationships you can build, and they all feel very rewarding. Oh, but me and Carrie, we're just friends. Like, totally really tight, good buddies. Just super close friends. Nothing else. Nothing. With many good side quests in the game that did grip me, there are some that left me very unsatisfied in the end. The biggest offender of this is the Perales mission line. You build this relationship with a politician running for office and his wife, and slowly uncover a conspiracy that a shady group of people have been planting false thoughts into their heads to control them and make them think the way they want. When you discover this and either hide the info from the family or decide to tell them, the questline just ends, and the only closure you get is at the end of the game with a phone call from Perales. You never get to figure out who's behind it or why. It just feels like it ends so abruptly and out of nowhere, leaving me confused and like I was missing part of the game. And I swear, if this comes into DLC later, it will drive me insane. Spoilers ahead for everybody that's still watching the video. The endings to Cyberpunk are disappointing. I know many don't feel like they have a problem with the endings, but almost all of them make me feel like I was cheated. There are multiple endings, and each is unique in how they are carried out, and the prologue they bring. The problem is that all these different endings are just backdrops to 3 different outcomes that are the exact same. The 3 major outcomes of the game are you kill yourself, you take your body back but only have 6 months to live, and Johnny takes over your body. Permanently. I don't want to get into the first ending as it's the least interesting out of the 3 and it just ends with you offing yourself. But the second ending needs to be addressed. Throughout the game, you are constantly reminded that this biochip you had put into your head is slowly overriding your mind with a copy of Johnny Silverhand. The game makes you feel pressure to get the chip fixed as soon as possible, but does not punish you by waiting, and you can do everything there is to do in the game, and nothing bad ever happens to you except for a fake prompt sometime. Fake timers like this feel pretty pointless in a free roam RPG experience, and in my opinion can take away from the experience entirely, since it constantly reminds you of a ticking time bomb in your head as you waste time scuba diving as you're literally dying. It does give a good dilemma to V, as he tries to come to terms with the potential only way to save his own life is to make a copy of his own consciousness to replace what Johnny had already taken over. This makes the ending already sad for V, as he doesn't really know if it's the real him left in his head or just a copy. But then the ending happens. And no matter what you do beforehand, if you choose to go back into your body in the final decision of the game drops that you only have 6 months to live after this. This makes most of the game feel completely pointless. You fought so hard to get your life back against all odds to only get an extension of 6 months that you don't even get to play in the game. Whichever path you choose to reach this ending, they do have a very emotional final cutscene, and they're really visually spectacular, and also the only point in the game you get a third-person cutscene, which looks really good, and I feel like was some of the best cutscenes in the game. But I just feel cheated. Like everything me and my V went through in dozens of hours of gameplay didn't matter. And no matter what choice I made in the game, V's fate was sealed from the start. In an RPG. Then there's Johnny's ending. If you choose to give Johnny your body, he gets to live a full life, a second chance to make up for the mistakes of his past. It feels the most fulfilling as you get to see firsthand how much Johnny has grown just being with V. And he decides to leave Night City because he's ready to move on and be a different person from what he once was, a terrorist looking for change. And the game ends with him getting in a bus and it driving away. A melancholy ending and closure to the story of Johnny Silverhand. Cyberpunk 2077 was an incredibly ambitious game, and was way more than CD Projekt Red was ready for. The game suffers from the problem of too much scope and not enough time, as well as a lack of communication between different departments, to the extent that many developers didn't know Cyberpunk had gone gold until they saw the tweet confirming it that day in the office. At that time, they were still working on the game, and shortly after the Gone Gold announcement, the game was in fact delayed again. The lack of communication and outside pressures and influence are the main reason Cyberpunk 2077 came out half-baked. Management was being less than helpful. For example, some people were making assets for the game that had already been made by other departments, but they didn't know because there was no chain of command delivering these messages. Look, I like Cyberpunk 2077, and I had a good time playing it, but it's just not what I was expecting. And like many others, Cyberpunk left me sad and disappointed. Happy with what I got, but wanting much more. Not having to wait another year for Cyberpunk Finished Edition. I made this video because I was upset, and I wanted to know what happened to a company that I once idolized above the rest. I had a lot of faith in Cyberpunk, to the point where it's the first game I've pre-ordered in years. And I know I'm not alone in this, and I just hope this video can help somebody out in some way, make them feel like they're not alone. And even though it's just a game, it saddens me to see it in a state like this, and I know the developers were crunched to insane hours, and I just hope in the future this becomes a lot less common, and we hear more stories about good development cycles, and then we see more good games come out. But right now, what we got is just an unfinished, sloppy mess that just leaves me more disappointed than anything. Although, there was an RPG that came out this year that gave me the experience that I was expecting from Cyberpunk, but I'll save that for a later video. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. This video could not have been possible without my two editors, Heckno and Brennan Bates. Both are amazing creators, and their stuff is going to be in the description or on screen if you want to go check them out. I cannot recommend them enough. Also, if you like this video and want to see more stuff like it, let me know in the comments down below what you'd love to hear me talk about, and I'd be more than happy to read all of them. Anyways, I'm Brady Anderson, this is Braid Nation, and I'll see all of you guys in the next video.